Hello, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Emma had already made it clear to her friends that she believed in living freely. That was just her way of seeing the world, expressing herself and making decisions without looking back too much. For years, everyone saw how she and Liam built something solid, almost perfect. They had deep trust, shared goals, and respected each other's space. The two of them matched in nearly every way. They traveled together and bought furniture with the calm precision of people planning a future. Their social media photos showed genuine smiles. It was hard to imagine that just months before their wedding, something could shake what seemed so stable. The invitations had already been printed. The wedding party knew their roles. The ceremony, set in a quiet venue, reflected the couple's exact style. Emma had handled every detail like someone shaping her future with her own hands. Still, something inside her kept bothering her, a feeling that she was missing out on something. It wasn't about loving Liam any less. It was about understanding parts of herself she'd never explored. In her mind, she needed to live that before saying yes in front of everyone. She talked first with Sophie, a longtime friend who listened with a confused expression. Emma explained she wanted to have experiences with other men before getting married. She thought it would make her more complete, more mature, maybe even a better partner. Sophie hesitated. She tried to understand but let it slip that Liam probably wouldn't react the way Emma hoped. Emma didn't back down. She said this wasn't about betrayal but about an agreement, an interval. A brief space to satisfy an old, buried curiosity. In the days that followed, she repeated the conversation with other friends. Some tried to be diplomatic. Others were more direct, saying Liam would never accept something like that. Emma listened to it all, yet remained convinced. She believed love and freedom could coexist, that she could go through this phase and then return to the relationship with even greater commitment. In her mind, Liam would understand. He'd accept it. He'd get past it. She picked a quiet day to talk to him. She prepared the space with care, his favorite meal, soft music playing in the background. She wanted everything to feel normal so she could bring up the topic naturally. When she mentioned what she was thinking, Liam took a while to respond. He just looked at her for several seconds. She thought it was the initial shock, that he'd need time to process the idea, but he stayed silent. So, she rephrased it. She explained it wasn't about emotional infidelity, but a temporary physical experience, something she needed to live through before tying her life to someone else's forever. He didn't argue. He only asked one question: why now? She tried to answer honestly. She said that during their relationship, she never felt like she was missing anything. But as the wedding got closer, the idea of not exploring other possibilities started to weigh on her. It wasn't impulsive, it was a well-thought decision. She trusted him enough to believe they could get through it together. Liam took a deep breath, looked at her, and said he thought he knew the woman he was about to marry, that he'd always respected her choices, opinions, and independence. But right then he felt like everything they'd built was falling apart. He stood up from the table and went to the bedroom. He stayed there for a while. When he came back, he was holding the ring he wore on his finger. He placed it on the table. He said he couldn't go on with someone who was ready to live other stories just as their future together was about to begin. That respect also meant having boundaries. That trust, once broken, rarely returns to what it was. She tried to argue, but he'd already made up his mind. Liam left the apartment that night. He sent a short message to her parents letting them know the wedding was off. On social media, he posted a brief note thanking everyone for their support and saying life sometimes takes different paths. He didn't mention the reason. He didn't expose anyone. He just turned the page. Emma was left alone in the apartment that used to be theirs. She tried to figure out where everything went wrong. She was sure her intentions were genuine, that she was trying to learn more about herself, not hurt anyone. But the truth was, in doing so, she underestimated the weight of her choices. She thought love would be strong enough to survive any proposal. She just didn't realize that for some people, love is exactly what you don't put to the test. Emma spent the following days in silence. The apartment felt different, even though everything looked the same. Liam's things were still there, but they carried a kind of emptiness she'd never felt before. The coffee was still in the same cabinet, his toothbrush in the bathroom, his coat hanging behind the door. Everything was still present, but he was already gone. She tried to convince herself it was just a strong reaction, that he just needed time to understand. She thought about sending a message. She wrote it, deleted it over and over. She called, then hung up before the first ring. She kept thinking he'd come back, that after the shock passed, he'd remember how much he loved her, what they'd built, and give her another chance. But Liam hadn't left any loose ends. He was clear with his closest friends, saying the engagement was over and he didn't want to discuss it. He also removed her name from the venue's reservation, canceled contracts with vendors, and called off the honeymoon. He did it all with the precision of someone who knows that if he hesitates, he might end up backing down. And he didn't want to back down. He'd already made it clear. Broken trust is like shattered glass. You can try to glue it back, but it'll never be the same. Emma found out through social media that he'd announced the end. A simple post, no drama, no long explanations. He just said the wedding plans were canceled and thanked those who had supported them. That hit her harder than any shout, harder than any fight. She felt the ground shift slightly, as if she was finally realizing Liam was truly leaving her life. She still tried to reach out. She sent a short message saying she wanted to talk. He saw it, didn't reply. She tried calling days later. It went to voicemail. She insisted once more, asking if they could meet to clear things up so he could better understand what she meant that night. This time he responded with just a few words. There's nothing left to clarify after that total silence. Her friends were divided. Some thought Liam had been too harsh. Others believed Emma made a mistake by suggesting something so delicate, assuming he'd accept it without getting hurt. Most chose to step back out of caution, discomfort, or respect for both of them. She found herself increasingly isolated. She stopped getting invites to gatherings, group lunches, celebrations that once felt routine. She realized that besides losing Liam, she was also losing a part of her life she considered stable. Meanwhile, Liam showed no sign of regret. He moved back in with his brother for a while, then rented a new apartment. He switched gyms, changed his phone number, and reorganized his contacts. He knew he needed a clean start with no traces of the past. He threw himself into work and avoided any kind of emotional involvement. He was hurt, but he decided to turn the pain into growth. At one point, Emma reached out to Ava, a mutual friend. She said she still loved Liam, that she hadn't meant any harm, and that she regretted how she handled everything. Ava listened but stayed neutral. She said she couldn't get involved, that she respected both of them, but that Liam seemed determined to move forward. That confirmed what Emma was starting to accept. He had completely left her life. What bothered Emma most wasn't just his absence, but how he handled it. No scandals, no public exposure. He just left. He closed the door without slamming it, and that unsettled her. She expected tears, questions, pleas for her to stay. She expected to hear he needed time, that maybe they could find a way, but Liam was different. He left like someone who knows himself, like someone who knows what they deserve and refuses to settle for less. Over time, she began rethinking her choices. She realized the freedom she sought came with a price. That sometimes when certain doors close, they're not just locked, they're sealed. And no matter how much she tried to explain, rebuild, or justify, some decisions don't have a way back. And in this case, Liam had made that clear from the very beginning. Emma took a deep breath and decided to move forward. After days of trying to accept Liam's permanent absence, she clung to the idea that she needed to prove something to herself. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the stubborn belief that her original plan still made sense. She deleted photos, canceled wedding reminders, and stored the remaining papers from her old life in a drawer she started avoiding. Instead of seeking reconciliation, she chose to live what she believed she needed to live. It started with a co-worker who had always shown interest. There were no promises or commitments, just a casual dinner, a relaxed conversation, and her first experience in this new phase. In the weeks that followed, Emma fell into a rhythm she'd never experienced before. Dating apps, dates, messages exchanged during work hours. She felt like she was finally enjoying a freedom she'd always imagined but never had the courage to live. Each new experience seemed to confirm her theory that she needed to know other bodies, other gestures, other dynamics. She'd come home with a sense of mission accomplished. She'd look in the mirror and tell herself she was maturing, growing, expanding. The idea of regret still felt far away. She kept telling herself she'd been honest from the start, that she'd tried to do everything respectfully, that Liam simply chose not to understand. Months passed and the dates became more frequent. Different men, similar conversations. Some were kind, others too direct, some didn't even stay for breakfast. Emma got used to the lack of affection. She created a filter to protect herself from repeating emotional patterns. She told herself it was just a phase, and once she felt complete, she'd look for something serious again. But every time she woke up next to someone new, there was a small discomfort she pushed to the back of her mind. The bed felt larger than before, the silence heavier. One weekend, she ran into James, an old college acquaintance they'd always had good chemistry with. They spent the day together, laughed like they used to, and reminisced about simpler times. At the end of the day, he approached her differently, more carefully, with real interest. She let him. This time, it felt more natural. James made breakfast the next morning and stayed to watch a movie with her. For a few weeks, they went out often. Emma felt better around him, like all those previous experiences had just been a bridge leading her here. But when James started showing more involvement, sending sweet messages, planning a weekend together, she pulled back. She said she wasn't ready for anything serious, that she needed more time. He didn't understand. He asked if she was still thinking about Liam. She said it wasn't about him. It was about her. James left with a disappointed look, saying he wasn't there to fill empty spaces. Once again, she was alone. After that, she tried to return to her routine of quick dates. But something had changed. What once felt empowering now started to feel repetitive, predictable, even exhausting. The fake smiles on apps, the generic compliments, the same places that no longer sparked curiosity. Slowly, she began to feel like she traded something whole for scattered pieces, and each piece was smaller than the last. One day, she found an old note tucked at the bottom of her bag. It was from Liam. He'd left it for her on one of her birthdays. It said he felt like the luckiest man in the world to have her by his side, that he admired her strength, intelligence, and freedom. She read it and felt a tightness in her chest, not the kind that comes from missing someone, but from awareness. Right there in those simple, honest lines, she realized the love she'd lost was real, and the freedom she'd chased so hard might have already existed within that relationship. She just hadn't seen it in time. Trying to bury that feeling, she scheduled another date, but this time she canceled before leaving the house. She sat on the couch, staring at her phone, trying to figure out why it didn't make sense anymore. The answer was simple. She was tired of collecting short stories, pretending she was okay, smiling for photos that hid the emptiness inside. She tried listening to music, reading a book, keeping her mind busy. But the unease stayed. She started noticing she drifted from almost all her friends. Even Ava, who she'd always been close to, had become distant. Generic messages, delayed replies, avoiding meetups. Emma realized her life wasn't interesting anymore to people who knew who she used to be. She had changed, and many had quietly walked away, just like Liam. It was then she realized the experience she'd so desperately sought hadn't made her more complete. On the contrary, she had more stories to tell, but fewer people to listen. More moments captured in photos, but fewer memories that actually mattered. And above all, she carried an emptiness no new face could fill. Liam rebuilt his life quietly. He avoided talking about what happened. Even when co-workers asked about the canceled wedding, he'd just say they'd gone their separate ways. If someone pushed, he changed the subject. He never portrayed himself as a victim, nor did he blame Emma. He simply moved forward with the firmness of someone who refuses to carry bitterness that only weighs them down. He changed his haircut, got a new car, took on new projects at work, and volunteered to lead the expansion team in another city for a few weeks. Any opportunity that took him away from the old setting was welcome. Over time, he regained the admiration of everyone around him, not because of how he ended the relationship, but because of how he rebuilt his life without needing to prove anything to anyone. He arrived earlier at work, had lunch with co-workers he barely spoke to before, and picked up habits he dropped during the engagement. He signed up for a photography class, started running again on weekends, and began visiting his parents more often. A warm but distant relationship shaped by busy routines. During this time, several women approached him. Co-workers, friends of friends, a neighbor who always made small talk in the elevator. Liam appreciated the attention, responded politely, but never encouraged expectations. He said he was still sorting himself out. He wasn't lying or avoiding. He just made it clear it wasn't the right time to bring anyone into his transition. He got messages from Ava a few times. She said she was sorry about the broken engagement, and that she was there if he wanted to talk. He replied politely but kept his distance. He sensed there was more behind her kindness. One day, Ava invited him for coffee. She said it was just a casual meetup, no hidden agenda. He agreed, more out of curiosity than desire. During the conversation, she probed how he was feeling emotionally, made comments about the past, and said she always thought he deserved someone who admired him more. Liam listened, thanked her, but ended the meeting before things went deeper. He realized that no matter how well-meaning Ava seemed, getting involved with her now would be a dangerous shortcut back to what he'd worked so hard to leave behind. Besides, she was part of a cycle he wanted to turn into a memory. He didn't feel anger, just preferred not to repeat the same names. A few months later, at a company charity event, Liam was introduced to Olivia. She'd been invited by a mutual friend from the marketing team. Unlike the other women who'd crossed his path since the breakup, she didn't seem eager to impress. She was direct light with a mix of kindness and strength. They talked about travel, music, childhood stories. She mentioned she worked in child rehabilitation and loved her job, even with the demanding schedule. He was more drawn to the way she spoke than the content itself. She didn't know him, had no idea who he'd been to Emma, and carried no judgments about what he was rebuilding. Over the weeks, they started exchanging messages. No pressure, no demands. They'd meet up when possible, talk when they felt like it. For the first time, he felt like he didn't have to prove anything. Olivia didn't ask about his past, nor did she rush to label what they were experiencing. She was just there, present, with a naturalness he hadn't felt in a long time. He also noticed he smiled more around her. He didn't watch his words or compare behaviors. He felt whole, Not because she completed him, but because with her, he felt free to be himself without justifying old scars. After several months, Olivia invited him to meet her parents. It was a calm evening with honest conversations and spontaneous laughter. They mentioned their daughter hadn't brought anyone home since her last relationship ended. Liam heard that with a mix of surprise and gratitude. He felt this was something new for both of them, something that didn't need explaining, just living. When they got back to her apartment, Olivia held his hand for a few seconds and said she felt safe with him. Liam just smiled. He didn't make promises or big plans, he just enjoyed the moment. A few weeks later, he asked her to be his girlfriend. It was simple, direct, just like everything between them. Olivia accepted without hesitation. Unlike with Emma, Liam now knew what he wanted, and more than that, he knew how to care. Every detail of this new chapter felt built with patience. No rush, no masks. She met his parents, and not long after, he took Olivia to lunch with his sister and nephews. She became part of the family before either of them realized it. The old photos with Emma were taken out of boxes, not out of anger, but out of respect for the new time unfolding. Liam didn't shout to the world that he'd moved on. He didn't need to. His life showed it. He no longer carried the weight of the past, nor doubts about who he was. And for the first time in a long time, he felt the love he received matched what he'd always given. No demands, no conditions, just presence, choice, and truth. The wedding invitation from Ava came as a surprise to Emma. They hadn't spoken in months, only brief, cold messages now and then. Still, Emma's name was there, printed in gold letters, alongside other guests who seemed to have moved on with their lives. For a moment, she thought about declining. Then she reread the invite and noticed a detail that stirred something inside her. The ceremony would be at the same venue where she and Liam had planned to get married. That sparked something she couldn't name. Curiosity, maybe, or an unconscious urge to face it all head-on, like returning to the scene of an accident to understand what truly broke. On the day of the ceremony, she wore an elegant, understated dress and got ready alone. The whole way there, she rehearsed what she'd do if she saw Liam. She thought about how to greet him, what tone to use, whether to smile. She tried guessing if he'd be with someone. Even though she told herself it didn't matter anymore, part of her wanted to know who now occupied the space that once belonged to her. When she arrived, a few familiar faces greeted her politely, but the atmosphere felt different. She sensed she was part of an old chapter, read too many times, now being quietly set aside. When Liam walked in, she didn't need to ask. She recognized that look, that calm presence, and the woman beside him, hand in hand, standing firm and peaceful, radiated exactly what Emma had lost: reciprocity. It was the first time she'd seen Olivia. No comparisons were needed. Olivia had a presence that spoke for itself. She didn't need to say anything to show she was there on her own merit, and that Liam had chosen her with conviction. He looked at peace. There was no tension in his face, no avoided glances. He was comfortable, whole. Emma watched from a distance. She tried to smile, but something inside her tightened. She'd felt discomfort before, loneliness, regret, longing. But this was different. It was the real, irreversible realization that time hadn't waited for her. While she chased experiences she thought were liberating, the love that could have sustained her through any phase had found another path. And that path had already bloomed. It already had history, roots, purpose. There was nothing to reclaim, only acceptance left. During the reception, she moved between tables, talked to a few guests, but her attention kept returning to Liam. She watched his gestures with Olivia, the tenderness in their touches, the ease in their conversations, the quiet looks they exchanged. It was everything she and Liam once had, but that she'd allowed to slip away. The absence of bitterness in him hit her hardest. He didn't seem burdened by resentment, nor did he avoid meeting her gaze. He was simply living, like someone who forgave but never forgot who he was. At one point, while getting a drink, Ava approached. She said Emma looked beautiful and thanked her for coming. Then, almost like whispering a truth off script, she said she knew how much this reunion might hurt. Emma swallowed hard, nodded slightly, and thanked her too. Ava didn't say anything else. She just stood there for a few seconds before walking away. It was as if both of them knew no apology could change what had been done. And this was the moment to face it all in silence. Near the end of the night, watching Liam and Olivia dance together, Emma realized she was no longer part of his story. And more than that, she understood she might never have truly grasped what it means to love someone so deeply you don't want to hurt them. She thought about all the times she justified her decision, the talks with friends, the lies she told herself to keep believing in her narrative of freedom. And right there, faced with all of it, she realized true freedom isn't about chasing what you want at any cost, but about recognizing the value of what you already have. As she left the party, she chose not to say goodbye to Liam, not out of pride, but because she knew there were no bridges left between them. The last image she'd keep of him was this: standing beside a woman who looked at him with admiration, love, and peace. A simple picture, but strong enough to stay. She got in the car in silence. No tears, no speech. For the first time in a long while, she accepted the pain as part of the process. And in that moment, the emptiness she'd spent so long trying to fill with fleeting stories revealed its true name: regret. Not the kind that screams or begs for forgiveness, but the kind that settles quietly when you realize the love you lost has already found a new home and it doesn't plan to return. In the heart-wrenching tale of Emma and Liam, we uncover a profound life lesson. True freedom isn't found in chasing fleeting curiosities at the expense of cherished bonds, but in recognizing and nurturing the love we already hold. Emma's quest for self-discovery before their wedding shattered the trust they had built, leaving her with a hollow victory of temporary experiences that paled against the depth of genuine connection. As she watched Liam rebuild his life with quiet strength, finding peace with Olivia, Emma grappled with an irreversible regret, a silent ache that echoed the emptiness of choices made without weighing their true cost. This story reminds us that love demands boundaries, respect, and unwavering commitment. Once tested beyond repair, it may slip away forever, teaching us to treasure the present before it's lost to the winds of what if. Life's most valuable relationships are fragile treasures. Handle them with care, or risk a lifetime of quiet sorrow. What lessons have you learned from love's trials? Share your stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And if this moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more emotional journeys into the human heart. Let's grow together.